we use the info war, the truth, to battle the lies, and we're trying to stop the planet from being turned into a giant control grid. And that's what the technocrats, in Brzezinski's own words, are trying to build, is a penal planet, basically, where everyone is treated as guilty until proven innocent. But it's beyond that. This is a totalitarian system. And joining us until 50 after, and he will take your phone calls at the bottom of the hour. We'll clear out some phone lines here later and take some calls for William Binney. He's the former technical leader for intelligence with the National Security Agency before becoming a whistleblower in late 2001. After more than 30 years with the agency, Binney has been described as one of the best analysts and code breakers in NSA history. Binney continues to speak out about the NSA's data collection policies and continues to do interviews in media regarding his experiences and communication intercepts by governmental agencies of American citizens. In a legal case, Binney has testified in an affidavit that the NSA is in deliberate violation of the U.S. Constitution. Exposefacts.org is one site where you can read some of his writings. 2 weeks ago in the London Guardian, they ran a story about him testifying to the German parliament in a German intelligence surveillance inquiry. The headline was, "The ultimate goal of the NSA is total population control. At least 80% of all audio calls, not just metadata, are recorded and stored in U.S., says whistleblower William Binney. That's a totalitarian mentality." In another interview, he described it as, "We are now in a police state, and we now take you to the highest ranking ever NSA or period intelligence whistleblower from the highest levels to break down what's really going on." William Binney, thank you so much for your courageous action in defense of free civilization.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
You know, there's so many places to go here, sir, but first off, just 7, 8 years ago, Bush would get up and say, "We don't listen to any Americans without warrants. It's preposterous." 8 years later, okay, we listen to everything you do, but it's for your own good. Describe what we're facing here and where you see things going, because my concern is, thanks to you and others, we know about the level of deception now, but now it's almost like a mainlining of this.
Yeah, the real problem is that when you gather all kinds of information like this on everybody in the planet, that gives you leverage to blackmail anybody you want. And like the KGB, this is the kind of stuff that they did. I mean, the point is, if they can't get at you directly, they can try to get at somebody that you care about, someone in your family or someone that you're really interested in protecting. And so that's some of the techniques that I think are now possible with all the information that they've assembled. And they're using the FBI to look at it, to do things like find something that would leverage and get Petraeus or Generals Petraeus or Allen out of office, or look at how to get rid of Elliot Spitzer, who was going after the bankers after that colossal banking failure in 2008. Something that would help protect the interests that you have and yet get rid of your opponents or people you don't particularly care to have around.
Total control beyond the Stasi. I want to talk about, I mean, I know you can't get into classified things that you were involved in, but I've talked to Wayne Madsen and other NSA whistleblowers, and he said that back when he was in the agency, they really didn't spy on people illegally, and that there has been a real change and a real shift. Is that accurate? And fill folks in on why you left in 2001.
First, I left in 2001 in October, once I found out that they were spying on everybody in the United States. That meant they were pulling in. Initially, this was the first round. I mean, I'd been working the Soviet Union for almost 30 years. And the KGB and the MVD were really, they focused in on getting all kinds of information they possibly could on their population, as well as anybody in the world that they could use that. And they could use that information as leverage against them. This was a standard tactic to use in espionage. So, and the Stasi was no different in East Germany. They did the same thing, except they didn't do it anywhere near as complete and as accurate and as timely as we do it. So when they started that with the telecoms, pulling in all the data and the telephoning of every U.S. citizen as well as everybody else they could in the world, Well, that simply meant to me that they had no respect whatsoever for the oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. In fact, they scrapped the Constitution. So, and that's what I saw. And they did it under the guise of Article 2, War Powers Act, that President Bush was claiming. Well, in fact, I kept asking the lawyers that I had and others, I said, what war are we in? When did Congress declare war? And the answer is they didn't. And so therefore he could not, in fact, claim War Powers Act. So they were all doing it on a false premise, and everybody bought into that because we'd just been attacked. Then they were all afraid of getting another attack. And instead of using discipline and analysis and focused, disciplined analysis to find the bad guys and go after them and get them and stop them, they went to this bulk acquisition of data on everybody, which simply inundated them with information. And unless they focused in on a target in that bulk data, they couldn't find anything else in the grand scheme of things because there was just too much data to look at. No human or set of humans could possibly do it. So if you were doing something they didn't like, they could focus on you and go after you. But with all this data, but if you were trying to detect terrorism around the world in this bulk data acquisition environment, why you were buried and you couldn't find them. So that's really the problems that I see. I mean, they were making themselves dysfunctional. They couldn't actually protect us anymore, and they were violating our constitutional rights and throwing away our privacy, when in fact they could have maintained all of the privacy of everyone in the world, focused an attack on known terrorists and bad guys in zones of suspicion around them, and done a real focused, disciplined attack to stop these things, and succeeded. Instead, they took this bulk approach and failed.
William Binney, the top NSA whistleblower in history, joins us. Exposefacts.org is the whistleblower website where you can read some of his specific writings. You know, I've been politically involved promoting liberty for 20 years on air now, and I personally have had repercussions that have even come out in the newspapers by the FBI and others. And when you get on a White House enemies list and it comes out in the newspapers, it's surreal. And I personally have covered secret government conferences like Bilderberg and then had them call my wife. No number comes up on the phone and, you know, say, I hope your dad dies when he's in the hospital and is just gone. I mean, they're obviously listening to the phone. I have experienced this, so I understand how draconian it is. I know it's come out that some of the NSA whistleblowers have been harassed, have had repercussions. It's come out in the news that NSA people are using it to harass their ex-wives, ex-husbands. Police are using databases to harass people. In New York, over the white flags last week, they now admit they're pulling everyone's cell phone data, basically in the city, to track who was where. I mean, this is ubiquitous now that it's being used for political control. And then we learn from Seattle, Washington, to Chicago, Illinois, to Austin, Texas, there's been a covert 15-year program that we first broke, discovering the federal purchase orders and grants, to put microphones up, listening to people on street corners. It's just the sky's the limit now of this Orwellian system. Have you ever, Mr. Binney, or do you know of others that have been targeted and harassed using the NSA systems?
Well, I know I have, because I've been in the sworn affidavit they signed against us, the group of NSA whistleblowers. They claimed that they had a recording of a phone call that I told them about, which I know I didn't tell them about. So that was basically they were exposing the warrantless wiretap they had on us. So they were doing that to us, and they were doing it to all kinds of people. Thomas Tam, who was the DOJ attorney preparing warrant requests for the FISA court, detected some of this warrantless wiretapping back in 2003, 2004, and he was one of the sources for the New York Times exposure of the warrantless wiretapping program. And so he recognized that they were violating the constitutional rights of everybody and violating the law. In fact, he on Frontline in a recent broadcast said that this was a federal felony that they were committing. There was a time there back at that period of time when they thought maybe the Attorney General would be indicted. That was Ashcroft at the time. So they've known that this is the kind of tactics and techniques they've been using all along. And in the process, what they do is they fabricate evidence. They go around and do a parallel construction to get, like using normal policing techniques to try to find the data. They already know where it is, so it makes it pretty easy, you know. And so then they go get it through normal policing techniques and then substitute that for the NSA collection as the basis for arresting people to submit that data in court, which means they're perjuring themselves in court every time they do that. You know, and it's simply subverting our entire judicial process as they're executing it. I mean, I call this a planned program perjury policy run by the Department of Justice of the United States.
Is it not, by the very definition, organized crime, racketeering?
I would think of it that way, yes.
It's a kingpin operation, because if you study kingpin operations from Sicily right through to modern times using the Italian model, which even goes back to Caesar, you corrupt people. It's not just getting them to take the money or getting them to violate the law. Now you can blackmail the DEA agents, the FBI, the Secret Service, and everyone else. You can also plant fake data on them without even using the sneak and peek provision of the Patriot Act. And it is bigger than just spying on everyone or ruining and muddying all the intelligence waters. It's a chilling effect, but it's also a mass corrupting program where now, I mean, I've talked to local police years ago that were in the Threat Fusion Center, and they said, no, we can listen to you right now. So then select police are being brought in and federalized and allowed to get into the Palantir system. I mean, right now, I think they're using the cover of NSA coming out, Mr. Penny, to actually hide it in plain view. And if we don't reverse this revolution of Big Brother, it will now be standardized. Do you get my finer point there?
Yes, I do, and in fact, I agree totally with it. And as an example, you can use Nancy Pelosi when she was Speaker of the House. If you recall, when she said that impeaching George Bush is off the table.
Yes.
If you remember that, well, the point was that she was co-opted into that program in October of 2001. She was the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, and at that time, the chair and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees were the only ones in Congress briefed on this program. That was, I think, around the 4th of October of 2001. And she bought into those programs as well as other similar programs at CIA, which meant that George Bush could say, if you want to impeach me, you have to impeach yourself because you're a part of this, you're culpable in this. So that's the leverage of leverage that he had against her. So that leverage is the game they're playing.
It really is the ultimate form of discrimination by a ruling class in the Soviet Union, in Eastern Germany. The British, of course, wrote the book on this, as you know, to gobble up everything, create files on everything, and then use it to politically persecute who you want. But then beyond that, only the establishment and select corporations that are part of it are given access to it. They then use the data, not even against political enemies, but to consolidate the economy. It's unfair trade practices. It's the end of the free market. And then you find out it's been an organized telecommunications plan since the early 90s and the Telecommunications Act of 96 to put these hubs in everywhere. You were there at the NSA at that time. I mean, weren't people concerned, like James Bamford, I know, wrote about it, when it was obvious that they were putting in this real-time surveillance?
Well, I think the issue goes back, and this is probably what Jim was referring back to, was back in the Nixon days when he had NSA with their program Minaret and FBI with COINTELPRO and CIA with Chaos, all collaborating to spy on enemies of the Nixon administration, those opposing the war. Martin Luther King, John Lennon, and various other people in the country. They at the time, you see, the problem was they could only do so much. They only had so much effort, so they could only handle maybe a couple thousand people. But now, with the new technologies, that gives you the capability to do everybody in the country, in fact, most people in the world, which means you're monitoring hundreds of millions, if not billions of people every day. So that's the kind of leverage that this kind of technology gives them. They're doing
You've exposed the parallel construction that was in Reuters last August, exclusive U.S. directs agents to cover up program used to investigate Americans, where they're dragnetting the phone records, the phone calls of people selling each other marijuana and things like that. They selectively leave the big cartels alone, the big banks laundering the money. They then farm out the data to the DEA, who then farms it out to the threat fusion centers and to local police. What this is really doing, larger than just parallel construction and the fraud of the judicial system, is it's the federalization of the police, because they're only given access to the select data trails that the feds want them to go after, hence setting up a system of selective enforcement.
That's correct. And also there was a quote from the Reuters article last year from a federal agent who said, "This is such a great program, I just hope we can keep it secret." Well, you know, you don't get an informed electorate or anything in a democracy that way. I mean, that's a secret government.
Unbelievable. I know there's a lot you can't talk about because of national security, agreements and letters, but we've seen Sibel Edmonds, a whistleblower from the FBI, NSA side, breaking the gag order and exposing the fact that our government was basically manipulating and handling and protecting al-Qaeda right up until 9/11. Now we see ISIS, IS, al-Qaeda being armed to attack Syria, allowed into Libya, the very group we're told we have the NSA to fight. What is your view on Sibel Edmonds and people like her?
Well, I think she certainly pointed out some very important things that we need to pay attention to. I mean, and again, I think that the general population probably is not as actively involved as it should be by any means. So, I mean, you need to tell these people what they're doing is just a violation of our fundamental rights. And you need to say, if you don't straighten up and start to do the right thing next election, I'm firing you. I mean, that's what you've got to do with these people. You have to tell them outright, you're fired.
Well, that was my next question, is you're the expert. I'm asking the questions. I want you to take the floor here when we come back from break and speak to the American people, millions of folks out there, about a plan of action, how you think we turn this around, and other points. And we're going to give listeners an opportunity to tweet their questions at Real Alex Jones on Twitter at hashtag #IWChats. So hashtag IWChats. Tweet your questions for the top NSA whistleblower, William Binney, and he will graciously answer your questions here on air today. Turned down his big, high-paying job at the very highest levels of the NSA, directing an entire division to begin to warn the American people. First, he warned Congress. Nothing happened. Now he's warning folks publicly and warning the German government, the British government, and others. William Binney is our guest, so send your questions there to Real Alex Jones on Twitter at hashtag IWChats, and we will take those questions coming up in the next segment. But other points that you think are important for listeners out there to be aware of, Mr. Binney?
Well, I mean, I look at this as a fundamental destruction of our democracy. I mean, this is really what's going on. They're destroying the foundation of this country. And in the process, they're doing it around the world. I mean, it's not just limited here. What they do is they use this data around the world for law enforcement, and they use it to leverage people. I mean, that's one of the things that I tried to warn people about all around, is that this kind of gathering of information exposes everybody to forms of pressure or coercion. And so, I mean, those are the real, I mean, it's showing really the frailty of human beings and how they tend to use, once you give them knowledge, and that really is power, once you give them that power, one way or another, they tend to use it sooner or later. And so the point is, you need to have a real rigorous way of managing and making sure that they can't do it without being exposed. We don't have that now. What they do with whistleblowers is they attack them, they put them in jail, they do all kinds of things, discredit them and everything. They use the KGB tactics of saying they're mentally impaired, or, they're disgruntled employees, or, we need to put them away or something like that. So you can't believe the narrative you're getting out of the administration or the White House without challenge. And if you don't challenge it, and you're just swallowing the line that they're feeding you.
Well, there's also that paradox historically where by 1939 people knew Hitler was bad, but what do? He's in charge. It's the same thing with this bureaucracy and these corporate interests that are heavily hooked into the NSA and other agencies. They're just operating criminally out in the open now. They're not getting in trouble. And every time we say, hey, get back under control, they say, hey, let us spy on you or terrorists will attack you. Meanwhile, the border's wide open and the government's funding ISIS. It just doesn't hold water. The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other toxic members of the fluoride family are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the American people. So why are the social engineers adding it to the water? Simple. Dumb down the host population that the parasitic technocracy is feeding on. We may not have been able to get fluoride out of the water supply yet, but we can help to get it out of our bodies. I am extremely excited to announce the exclusive InfoWars Life Fluoride Shield formulation, fusing 6 of the best documented ingredients from around the world to help the body remove not just toxic fluoride residues from the body, but a whole host of toxic substances. Let's take a stand against the globalists by blocking their poisons with Fluoride Shield. I use Fluoride Shield every day. Secure your Fluoride Shield and other pioneering formulations at InfoWarsLife.com today. Let's start cleansing our bodies now and support the InfoWar at the same time. That's InfoWarsLife.com. But the establishment doesn't care about the poor schizophrenics at the bus stop talking to themselves. They care about the patent you've coming out with. They care about the fact that you saw the senator beating his wife. They want to know that you saw a drug shipment being flown into Mena, Arkansas. This allows the criminals in government, in the organized crime networks that have infested it, to basically get away with bloody murder. And I've interviewed so many CIA whistleblowers. I've interviewed so many Defense Intelligence whistleblowers, Delta Force whistleblowers, CIA contractor whistleblowers. It makes national news. You've heard them here. But a lot of this comes out on C-SPAN. But now with Edward Snowden and William Binney and others, there's no denying it. So there's this paradox that I was talking about earlier of where they've denied all this is happening. Now it's admitted, but they say, hey, you better let us do this or terrorists will get you. But then meanwhile, they're aiding and abetting radical Wahhabists all over the world in a destabilization program. William Binney is our guest. The toll-free number to talk to him is 800-259-9231. Please call with a question for him. We won't screen your call, but just ask a brief question so we can get a couple of your calls in. 800-259-9231. And the tweet questions are coming in at Real Alex Jones as well. We'll get to some of those here in a moment. But, sir, how do they get people into government that will engage in classical Soviet-style intimidation of the Associated Press, of Fox News, dossiers on drudgereport.com, on Infowars.com? That's come out in FOIA request. How do they get people to listen to your phone and then call your family member up and tell them they were listening to private conversations to mess with their minds, as has happened to me on 6 or 7 occasions? How do they get the governing class to engage in truly totalitarian activities?
Most people I knew at NSA were all very, patriotic, conscientious, hardworking people who believed in the Constitution, the rights of individuals. But the problem was a lot of them, about 85% of them were introverted type people. And that's come out by studies they've done on the population at NSA. They're on the Myers-Briggs scale. They're ISTJs, introverted, sensing, technical, judgmental kind of people. And so that's an easy class to intimidate. And that's basically what the government's been doing. They've been intimidating. That's why the Tom Drake trial was, they tried to make it open accusations against Tom Drake in public so that what they were doing was telling the rest of the population of the workforce that if you blow the whistle on us, we are going to come after you with everything we've got. And that's exactly, they showed, for example, the 60 Minutes program that was done back in May of 2011, about Tom Drake and the situation he was in. They showed that program internally in NSA to say, you see, to the workforce, you see, this is what's going to happen to you if you blow the whistle on us. So what they were doing was intimidating them, and they're very. It's a group of people who fundamentally are interested in or concerned about keeping their jobs. They've got families, they've got bills, they want to send their kids to college. They have all of those kinds of things, and it's all depending on them keeping a job. And so that's what they were doing there, is threatening them with their job and even their livelihood and their freedom. And that's fundamentally what they did internally in NSA and other places. And they later on, like right now, they're instituting programs internally in NSA to say, see something, say something, which means they're having the workforce spy against each other, just like they did in East Germany with the Stasi. So it's the same principles. They're applying those principles universally to intimidate people so they'll stay quiet. And that's how they keep them, that's how they get them to do what they want. Now, there's a certain portion of the population who loves doing violent things. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you can find those kinds of people anywhere, and they tend to use them the way they will. Again, like, for example, threatening you or threatening other people, and they threatening them physically, too. So.
Wow, William Binney, top NSA whistleblower, is here live on air with us on the radio and TV. At Real Alex Jones on Twitter, the questions are pouring in. Mr. Binney, one of those questions is, when do you think the end game is coming? That's from Ernie Ciarola on Twitter. When do you think the end game is coming? And I would ask you, what is the end game of this total surveillance society?
Well, it seems to me that they're tending toward a European-style government, or even more leaning toward a Stasi-type government, a Stasi-run government, where the intelligence service basically determines a lot of the policy of the government. And that's what's happening here. The intelligence community is more or less directing what the government is doing and how they do it, and it's basically affecting everything, even international decisions. Like they use them, I guess, to start the war in Iraq, and they used that kind of information back in the Tonkin Gulf, for the Vietnam War. All that kind of stuff is trying to influence how the government's doing, and they're getting much and more involved, and it's building a much larger empire with contractors all around the country, and over a couple million of them. I mean, it's not. The Washington Post did a series of 3 articles on Top Secret America. That was a rather good article that laid out this bureaucracy that's been built up since 9/11 all around the country, and in fact around the world. I mean, well, when you push up to $100 billion into the intelligence community every year, I mean, that gets to, it's approaching $1 trillion now that they've spent on this since 9/11. Well, that's the kind of thing that builds a bureaucracy that tends to need to feed and continue feeding.
Yes, sir.
And so that just continues and perpetuates itself, and they try to gain more and more influence. Like, for example, it came out recently that even when they were running Minaret at NSA, one of the people they hid from the fact that they were spying on them was Senator Church, and he was running the investigation against them. So, I mean, it shows you that they have the capacity to do these kinds of things in secret. And Russ Tice has also come out and testified that they were spying on members of Congress and also, members of the military, the senior-ranking generals, as well as the members of the Supreme Court. And, so
and then they use that when they want to destroy them to show they've got a mistress or a girlfriend.
Exactly.
And this is the bureaucracy, the military-industrial complex, illegally using data for political takeover, as we know has come out in England, where Parliament is secretly being spied on. They then use dirt on Parliament to make them vote to continue the illegal spying that makes the Rupert Murdoch phone hacking scandal look like child's play. I mean, this is just unbelievable, the ramifications of this.
Yeah, that's why I was saying they have this, collecting all this bulk data gives them the ability to find information on anybody in the world, and therefore use that as leverage or blackmail against either them or someone they care about. So, and that's how you leverage people. That's the standard KGB tactics for doing it.
So you spent 30 years fighting the KGB. William Binney's our guest, and now we are becoming the KGB. Simply astounding. Another question comes in from the Dead Reds. He says, is there a wake-up, at Real Alex Jones on Twitter, is there a wake-up inside NSA, good people within wanting to make a change? I think you kind of already answered that earlier, saying that, yes, they use the NSA system and have a whole NSA division that's come out to spy on the employees, not to stop foreign espionage, but to stop people from exposing crime.
Yes, that's right.
Amazing. Continuing, if we can't rely on elected politicians, asks CWED762, when all is lost, do you believe we can rely on military rebellion to help in reconstruction? William Binney.
Well, I think there's going to be a fundamental revolution coming, because I think, at least from my sense of it, is the people in America here are starting to wake up to this threat. They're starting to realize the dangers of what's going on. And I think that that's going to be a ground-based, from the bottom up revolution that's going to push these people to do the right thing. I mean, otherwise, I think we ought to fire them. I mean, after all, they are the ones that got us to where we are, and we are here because of them. They should be fired. That's all. That's the way I look at it. And then we should have a special prosecutor come back and clean it up. I mean, we have to do this. We have to hold these people accountable, or else it's going to continue. Like, for example, I blame this all on Jerry Ford, because Jerry Ford pardoned Nixon. Nixon was already indicted. He was going to go into court, and then Ford pardoned him. That's why I didn't vote for him, by the way. I voted for Jimmy Carter because he pardoned Nixon. I mean, that was the ultimate insult. I mean, what he was trying to do, what he did effectively was say, the president is above the law. His get-out-of-jail-free card is the next president. And that meant that things could only get worse since then, and that's what's happened.
Obviously, Obama is a puppet, but Boehner says that he shouldn't be impeached. I understand, as Ron Paul says on this show just a few weeks ago, all of them should be impeached who've been voting for this NSA and who know what's going on. Congress likes to pass the buck on to the president, but Obama more and more is acting like a dictator. Doesn't it send the right message to start impeachment of Obama on the NSA front? And then let's go and impeach Boehner as well. Shouldn't we see a constitutional, legal, lawful purge of all of the Stasi people in our government?
Yes, I believe we should. And one of the ways to do it, and we can do it without Washington being involved at all, and that's to have, under Article 5 of our Constitution, is to have a state's constitutional convention. And we can write in changes to the Constitution and ratify them at the same time, since it's the states doing it. Yeah. Where we could have a special prosecutor appointed by the states and the people, and give them the backing of the state police, the local police, as well as the National Guards in all the states, so that they have the backing of the power of the states to appoint prosecutors to go after everyone in D.C.
Well, I've always been against a con because they could hijack it, but now the bureaucracy's operating as an autocratic, technocratic system publicly. They brag about it. So what does it matter? I agree with you. I think the salvation lies with the states because that's where the people reside. William Binney, top NSA whistleblower, is graciously giving us his time today to try to promote basic freedom. Exposefacts.org is the website where you can see his work and other whistleblowers' work. I want to go to some phone calls here in a moment, but I wanted to ask you, because listeners are tweeting and asking about encryption. They're asking about different forms of encryption and does it work? I'm no encryption expert and no code breaker like you, but from what's been mainline news, almost all major encryption, it turns out, was set up by NSA moles to have back doors into it. And I think we should protest and remove the spying itself. You know, trying to avoid it, from what I've read, actually puts you at top of the list to be snooped on. Is that an accurate statement, sir?
Yes, the FBI looks at it by saying if you encrypt what you're saying to one another, that means you're hiding something, therefore you're guilty of something, therefore we're going to target you. That's basically their approach. My mine, you just made the statement about encryption being under the program Bull Run, which is what NSA is doing. It's weakening encryptions or getting back doors in for FBI or anybody else in the intelligence community to get into them, but they have weaknesses in the system so that in many cases they have the ability to read them, and that means that none of the existing publicly available encryption systems are necessarily secure. So you can't really, I mean, Tor, I think, is one way of helping to add a complication to it. Tor is a kind of an anonymizing program that allows you to send your packets of email around different ways, so it hides who you are in the network as the packet's passed and where you're going once you get there. So that adds a layer of complexity to the problem, which I think they're still, from what I've read anyway, they're still working through it. They're having some successes, but they're not through it yet.
Sure.
So there's still that level of protection that could occur there. But with encryption, it's doubtful that if they're really after you, that you can, because after all, even if you encrypt something successfully and you can defeat their attacks at the crypt system, once you decrypt something and put it on your computer, they can come in actively and attack your computer and take it off after you've decrypted it. Well,
sure. And of course, I was told about this years ago, but it came out last year. The new chips come out that can be energized even if your computer's walled off and not on the internet, and they can energize the chips wirelessly and suck the data off that way.
That's right. Yep.
William Benny, top NSA whistleblower, is our guest. We're moving quickly here. Let's go to some phone calls. George in Connecticut, you're on the air. Quick question.
Quick question. I have been victimized by this stuff, anonymous calls, you can't trace, death threats, all sorts of stuff from government officials when you start to step on high toes. But my question is, they basically run everything out to the nth degree so that you can't. They run it past the statute of limitations, so you can't do anything. So when you have enough information, you have enough details, you have enough witnesses, they basically are scot-free. We got to find a way to say, look, they don't. If they're doing this through the government means and basically able to run the clock out, should not be a clock at all. It should be a government crime, have no statute of limitations within the government itself.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations, though, is on the filing. That is, if you file a suit or a legal action against something, you have a certain amount of time to do that. But once you've filed, then you've met that limitation.
Sure.
That's one way of doing it. But I know exactly what you're saying. They try to drag things out as long as possible, hoping that you'll get exhausted or you'll exhaust your resources and can't continue and have to drop it. And that's the kind of hope they have. And that's the kind of power. They've got all the time and money in the world. I mean, after all, they need more money and they'll tax you some more.
Total tyranny, a scientific tyranny. George, thank you. Mr. Benny, you've been very gracious with the time. We've got a break coming up. If you've got to go, I understand. Or can you go another 10 minutes to the end of the hour?
Yeah, sure, I can go to the end of the hour.
All right, thank you. You're very nice, because I want to come back and jam in a call from Rob, Wes, George, and Brian. But quick questions, folks, so he can answer those. Mr. Benny, is that website I was giving out earlier, exposefacts.org, is that the best place for people to visit?
Or else whistleblower.org, or you can look at the Government Accountability Project, GAP. You can Google GAP and see all their websites and go in there. There's a lot of documentation in there, too.
Well, the good news is, thanks to you and others, we now know about all this. Instead of them lying, saying, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're mentally ill, none of that exists, as you said, using, again, the Soviet tactic. And you fought them for 30 years, confirming these are Soviet tactics we're witnessing. We got a real American hero, William Benny, on the line with us. I don't really admire football players or movie stars, and I've gotten to know a lot of them. But I admire people that have courage and have honor and who've tried to protect this country and who fought the Soviets, who were a true evil. And here he is telling you, after running a major division of the NSA, that we are mimicking the Soviet model or the Eastern German model. Mr. Benny, I want to get to a few more tweets and a few more calls here in the 6 minutes we've got, or 5 minutes now, but what's the bottom line here?
Well, I would kind of express the bottom line this way. I know we've been very comfortable in this country and expect our government to abide by the rules and the law and everything. That's because we haven't had a dictator in this country since George III, about 240 years ago. So we've been coming over time. We don't have that living memory or the experience of having a totalitarian state, not like the Germans do. And that's why the Germans are so upset, because they have living memory of the Stasi and some of the SS and KGB, and they know what this is all about. And so with that background, we in the United States become more trusting of the federal government, and they don't deserve it. And we need to stand up and speak up against this. That's the whole point, I guess.
And for those that don't know, every time you get one of these panopticon systems in, it only gets worse. The country devolves. So that's why the Germans are literally freaking out, because they know, folks, this thing rots. This doesn't get better unless you remove it. We have cancer politically. Let's talk to Rob in Oregon real quick. Rob, go ahead with a question for William Binney.
Thanks, Alex. Mr. Binney, thanks a million for your sacrifices. Quick question. How active and intrusive is Canada in spying on their citizens?
Well, Canada is a part of the Five Eyes, and I'm not clear on what extent they're involved with currently, although I believe they have access to things through a program that was published here not too long ago, X-Keyscore.
Yes.
Which is like an interrogation public routine that any of the Five Eyes, I believe, can use.
They all swap data.
Going into this bulk acquired data, yeah. So I think they're involved in that way. To what extent they participate in, cross-spying, like they look at U.S. people, we look at theirs, I don't know. I don't know what that is or what that relationship is. I think they're working together in a common database and a common analytic attack of that database.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Rob. Great question. It's amazing having such an expert mind on encryption here with us and how this works. Another question, does Mr. Binney know about the intelligence agencies using their capabilities to manipulate the stock markets? That's from one of our listeners on Real Alex Jones, Mike's Headroom.
Well, I really don't know anything about that, although it's not impossible that they couldn't be using that. I mean, that data is available for industrial espionage as well, so... that's the problem with this bulk acquisition of data like this. It makes everything possible. The question is, are they really doing it? And I don't really know for sure. It's
a universe of data. What about the issue of planting DNA, planting fingerprints? We know that's gone on for a long time. The media acts like they're 100%. What about all the governmental and corporate planting of evidence on people's computers using this system?
Well, I mean, that's certainly possible. I mean, it's not they can break into your computer and do just about anything they want to with it. Or for example, as one of the slides that was published recently, I think in a newspaper in the Netherlands, showed that worldwide assets for collection, and in there was a line that said greater than 50,000 implants in the worldwide network. Now, what that means is that's either hardware or software implanted in switches or servers or computers in the worldwide network, which means they basically control those devices. And they can have them and instruct them to do virtually anything they want to do.
Incredible. They're not just sending it through a system, a net that grabs it all. It's actually a control arm, just like the EAS systems to control communications. It's a total technocratic system. William Binney, thank you so much, sir, for the time. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield, true nascent iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund Infowars.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox special at InfoWarsLife.com.